Public agitator Martin Luther King Jr. was under surveillance by the FBI as early as 1955 due to his Montgomery bus boycott. In January 2025, President Trump issued an executive order, declassification of records concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We start to see the leak of FBI records related to MLKJr around this time. What these records reveal is MLK was a debauched figure as he fought against segregation, which would see the rise of various race wars and anti-white lynching, which continues to this day. The FBI was so disturbed by what they found in MLK, they issued an anonymous letter to him and his wife, which his wife termed mumbo jumbo. But was it? The November 1964 FBI King letter was stolen by activists in 1971 in Media, Pennsylvania, as they burgled one of the FBI's COINTELPRO offices. The author of the letter was suspected to be FBI Deputy Director William Sullivan, and various FBI officials went on record in 1964 to label King as a liar due to his statements about racial bias in various federal agencies. The FBI King letter was accompanied by a tape of King's sexual transgressions, including his preference for orgies, and mailed to his home. Was the FBI trying to warn the American people about King's malign influence as his marches swept through the national consciousness? Was King really the peaceful protester modernity wants to label him as? In view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor, and your last name calls to mind only the type of king, such as King Henry VIII, and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. White people in this country have enough frauds of their own, but I am sure they don't have one at this time that is anywhere near your equal. You are no clergyman, and you know it. I repeat, you are a colossal fraud, and an evil, vicious one at that. You could not believe in God and act as you do. Clearly you don't believe in any personal moral principles. King, like all frauds, your end is approaching. You could have been our greatest leader. You, even at an early age, have turned out to not be a leader, but a dissolute, abnormal, moral imbecile. We will now have to depend on our older leaders, like Roy Wilkins, a man of character, and thank God we have others like him. But you are done. Your honorary degrees, your Nobel Prize, what a grim farce, and other awards will not save you. King, I repeat, you are done. No person can overcome facts, not even a fraud like yourself. Lend your sexually psychotic ear to the enclosure. You will find yourself, and in all your dirt, filth, evil, and moronic talk, exposed on the record for all time. I repeat, no person can argue successfully against facts. You are finished. You will find on the record for all time your filthy, dirty, evil companions, male and female, giving expression with you to your hideous abnormalities, and some of them pretend to be ministers of the gospel. Satan could do no more. What incredible evilness! It is all there on the record, your sexual orgies. Listen to yourself, you filthy, abnormal animal. You are on the record. You have been on the record. All your adulterous acts, your sexual orgies extending far into the past. This one is but a tiny sample. You will understand this. Yes, from your various evil playmates on the East Coast to redacted, and others on the West Coast and outside the country, you are on the record. King, you are done. The American public, the church organizations that have been helping Protestant, Catholic, and Jews will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. So will others who have backed you. You are done. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has definite practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. 4 years after this letter, King was shot to death by James Earl Ray. In 1968, the FBI revealed the following about King in an internal memo. King's personal conduct. With the funds he received from the Ford Foundation, King held the first of 2 workshops in Miami, Florida, in February 1968 to train Negro ministers in urban leadership. One Negro minister in attendance later expressed his disgust with the behind-the-scene drinking, fornication, and homosexuality that went on at the conference. Several Negro and white prostitutes were brought in from the Miami area. An all-night sex orgy was held with these prostitutes and some of the delegates in attendance. One room had a large table in it which was filled with whiskey. The 2 Negro prostitutes were paid $50,000 to put on a sex show for the entertainment of guests. A variety of sex acts, deviating from the normal, were observed. This activity is not new to King and his associates. As early as January 1964, King engaged in another 2-day drunken sex orgy in Washington, D.C. Many of those present engaged in sexual acts, natural as well as unnatural, for the entertainment of onlookers. When one of the females shied away from engaging in an unnatural act, King and other of the males present discussed how she was to be taught and initiated in this respect. Throughout the ensuing years and until this date, King has continued to carry on his sexual aberrations secretly while holding himself out to public view as a moral leader of religious conviction. King's mistress. It was learned in February 1968 from a very responsible Los Angeles individual in a position to know that King had been having an illicit love affair with the wife of a prominent Negro dentist in Los Angeles, California, since 1962. He believes King fathered a baby girl born to this woman inasmuch as her husband is allegedly sterile. The child resembles King to a great degree, and King contributes to the support of this child. He calls this woman every Wednesday and frequently meets her in various cities throughout the country. The individual who reported this is himself a prominent Negro who is related by law to King's mistress. He advised he has known King since 1960 and refers to him as a hypocrite. He also reported King is having illicit love affairs with 3 other women. One of them is Joan Baez, the nationally known folk singer. The prominent Negro who furnished the information said he was appalled a man of King's low character could cause so much trouble for both Negroes and the government. As can be seen, it is a fact that King not only regularly indulges in adulterous acts, but enjoys the abnormal by engaging in group sexual orgies. These facts about the Nobel Peace Prize winner make his remarks seem incongruous. When he replied after winning this cherished award, "History has thrust me into this position. It would be both immoral and a sign of ingratitude if I did not face my moral responsibility to do what I can in the civil rights struggle." Today, Stanford University's King Institute and many others insist King had no communist influence at all. But is that true? In February 1962, FBI head J. Edgar Hoover told Attorney General Bobby Kennedy that Stanley Levison, a Jewish attorney who helped fundraise the over $1 million in King's Chicago bank account in 1963, and one of King's closest advisors, was a secret member of the Communist Party. According to FBI informants, Levison had been an influential member of the Communist Party of the United States of America as late as 1956. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which Levison took an active role in despite not being a Christian, was basically a communist front as it sought to bring down Southern Christian tradition and replace it with communism. Members of Levison's family revealed to author David Garrow that Levison had been associated since 1965 with Viktor Lysyovsky, a top Soviet official at the United Nations. Kennedy, in an attempt to legitimize the civil rights movement for voting purposes, told King to drop Levison and communist Hunter Pitts Odell. King promised to do so, but never did. All of this material can be found in the CIA's reading library. Due to the presence of these at least 2 known communists in King's orbit, Hoover deployed agents to find subversive material on King, and Bobby Kennedy authorized wiretaps on King's home and Southern Christian Leadership Conference offices in October 1963. After the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the traditional views of the FBI were almost completely scuttled, and the FBI turned into an arm of enforcing integration with all the force of the law, including violence, behind it. To date, exponentially more whites have been killed by blacks than the total number of blacks lynched, which is about 5,300 total.
King wasn't a Christian, and he wasn't a patriot, and he wasn't a meritocrat. He wasn't somebody who believed in merit. King's advisors, who wrote all of his speeches, who wrote his books, who basically fabricated this man that we know as Dr. Martin Luther King, many of whom were communists, who didn't believe one word in the Constitution or the Bible, but they knew how to use rhetoric to move crowds. The Civil Rights Movement, it was a way to usurp states' rights, to usurp state sovereignty, and to vest it into the coffers of the federal government. They wanted to expand federal authority. And the second iteration of the Civil Rights Movement would have been in the 1930s under FDR. It was called the National Negro Congress, and the National Negro Congress was started with the help of Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. Right. So you had the communists and you had the feds who had an interest in this civil rights movement. And the figurehead of it was a man by the name of A. Philip Randolph, who was an avowed socialist. The National Negro Congress was like the 1930s version of the civil rights movement. And then it would morph into the civil rights movement under the leadership of Martin Luther King by the 1960s. So again, it was started by the feds and by the communists, the civil rights movement. And it was never organic. It was never grassroots. It was never noble. It was basically meant to exploit grievances, some real, some fabricated, in order to usurp states' rights and to centralize power into the federal government. That's what it was always meant to do.
You look at what happened after the civil rights movement, and you have the expansion of the welfare state. And this was what we're told was a defining moment as to, okay, we're on the right trajectory now. There's still a lot of work to be done, but this social justice movement at least put us in the right direction. But then it was when I started reading Thomas Sowell that you start looking at the economic numbers, and you see that from the 1920s to 1960s, the poverty rate within Black Americans was 80%. By 1960, it had dropped to 29%. But then in the decades preceding the social justice movement, the poverty rates pretty much stayed the same. There was no movement. And then even from the 1920s to the 60s, things like homeownership within Black Americans was increasing. But then again, it just teeters off after this social justice movement. So it's really interesting that we have this kind of cultural narrative that is completely backwards to the economic reality.
The civil rights movement is not this grassroots organic thing, Negroes coming together. No, it was made in the Hollywood basement. The goal of the Soviet Union in helping start the civil rights movement was to usher in Marxism and communism into the United States by way of the Negro. The purpose of the feds was to use the civil rights movement to agitate in the streets, make states seem incapable of self-governance, create enough tension to where there's a public outcry, and they call for federal authority to sweep in and to enact legislation that expands the role of the federal government and infringes upon states' rights and the authority of the church.
We read one day, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Estimated that we spend $322,000 for each enemy we kill in Vietnam, while we spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor. The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. The other thing I want you to understand is this, that it didn't cost the nation 1 penny to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation 1 penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power. Yeah. All labor has dignity. Yes. But you're doing another thing. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages. America's opportunity to help bridge the gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And the question is whether America will do it. There's nothing new about poverty. What is new is that we now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty. And the real question is whether we have the will.
A historic restoration project now underway in Atlanta in this very first week of Black History Month.
The Prince Hall Masonic Lodge once housed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s office. And Atlanta News First anchor and attorney Joylyn Nakrin joins us now, walking us through this transformation.
Well, Blair and Tracy, the Prince Hall Masonic Lodge in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood is recognized as a cornerstone of civil rights history and Atlanta culture. Now a $10 million renovation to restore it is underway. The lodge was originally built in 1937 and served as a gathering place for prominent leaders. It was once home of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the nation's first Black-owned radio station, and the only office of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is home to the local Prince Hall Masons, a fraternal organization founded in 1775 by former slave and civil rights activist Prince Hall. The goal of this project is to return the lodge to its original grandeur, to turn it into a 16,000 square foot multi-use space, and of course, to preserve its history.
It's this community that created Dr. King, right? Dr. King didn't create this community. So to create a space that isn't a recreation of that past story, but a remembrance of that past story. Something to be built on, something to be honored, is really important.
The renovation is funded by grants from the National Park Service and Invest Atlanta, with the goal of completion by September. The bottom floors will be open to the public as part of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Park. Tracy?
Want to know the truth about Martin Luther King? His name wasn't even Martin Luther King. He was born Michael King Jr. in 1929. King Jr. officially changed his name on his birth certificate later, around age 28. He wasn't a real organic revolutionary. He was a plant. King and Rosa Parks both trained at the Highlander Folk School, a key activist training center shortly before the bus boycott, and King also being involved with Highlander, cementing their connection as leaders in the civil rights movement. Stanley David Levison, a close advisor and confidant of King, was one of the key people who helped draft the I Have a Dream speech. Michael King was a supporter of Zionism, viewing Israel as a democratic outpost and affirming its right to security and existence, rooted in his understanding of liberation and self-determination. see individuals and organizations significantly funded and supporting Michael King and the civil rights movement, providing crucial financial backing, legal support, and high-profile endorsements with leaders like Rabbi Abraham Josiah Heschel marching alongside King, and groups like the American Congress and NAACP, which is a organization partnering with King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference and other black organizations. In the 1989 autobiography, And the Walls Came Tumbling Down, Ralph Abernathy wrote that Michael King spent parts of his final night alive with two women and had an encounter with the third, whom he fought.
In 1959, he delivered another sermon. It was a walk through the Holy Land Easter Sunday sermon delivered at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, 29 March 1959 in Montgomery, Alabama. So if we're doing our math, that's after 1957. I will cut to the chase and get to near the end of the sermon. Martin Luther King Jr. Even when he died on a cross, one of the most ignominious deaths that we can ever point to in history, he had to be buried in a borrowed grave. We stood in there. But that guy began to talk, and he became eloquent when he talked about it. He said, but I want you to know that this tomb is empty. He is not there now. This is just a symbol of where he was, but he isn't there now. That's what the guide said. Martin Luther King Jr. says, whatever you believe about the resurrection this morning isn't important. Whatever you believe about the resurrection this morning isn't important. An orthodox person would only say that as a complete error. The form that you believe in, that isn't the important thing. Why? Because Martin Luther King Jr. demonstrating that he was being consistent with his doctoral thesis denying the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He goes on. The fact that he misspoke. He said revelation, but the fact that the resurrection is something that nobody can refute, that is the important thing. Some people felt, the disciples felt, that it was a physical resurrection, that the physical body got up. Then Paul came onto the scene. So the disciples thought it was physical. Paul, he's going to share, thought it was merely spiritual. Then Paul came on the scene, who had been trained in Greek philosophy, who knew a little about Greek philosophy, and had read a little, probably of Plato and others who believed in the immortality of the soul, and he tried to synthesize the Greek doctrine of the immortality of the soul with the Jewish Hebrew doctrine of resurrection. Oh, is that what he was doing? And he talked, as you remember, and you read right now, about a spiritual body. Sorry, I jumped ahead. And he talked, as you remember, and you read it, about a spiritual body. A spiritual body. Whatever form, that isn't important right now. The important thing is that the resurrection did occur. The important thing is that the grave was empty. The important thing is the fact that Jesus had given himself to certain eternal truths and eternal principles that nobody could crucify and escape. Now, does that sound like orthodoxy to you? Furthermore, I don't know that this ever gets to that these eternal truths were about Jesus Christ receiving the wrath of God on the sinner's behalf so that we might be forgiven and set free. They were eternal truths, but it doesn't appear to be gospel truth. The theology of Martin Luther King Jr., at best, is in question, at best. Let me share with you from John Piper, who spoke at the Martin Luther King 50 conference, where he had the courage to say, let's be careful here. Quote, he was blinded to the truth and beauty as Christ's majesty as creator of the universe, blinded to the glory of Christ's grace in suffering imputed guilt from others, blinded to the all-encompassing authority of Christ that he received when he rose bodily from the dead. Well, he only missed the virgin birth in there, and maybe the deity of Jesus Christ. So, well, no, actually, he did get the deity as the creator of the universe, so he hit on 2 of the 3 strikes. Now, John Piper continued, in his early 20s, Martin Luther King turned away from these great objective biblical realities. And you can read about it with sadness in many of his papers in those days. How could anybody speak at a conference like that? Sorry, I know it kind of came across as a joke. But why not Gandhi 100? Gandhi was as orthodox as Martin Luther King Jr., who wasn't orthodox. We wouldn't do a conference to celebrate his memory, I hope not. Elvis 40? Or is he 50 now? Is Elvis up to, that would be, so yeah, so it'd be Elvis 40. Let's do something to commemorate. Hey, Elvis, there was a Bible on his nightstand when he died. In the bathroom on the toilet floor from a drug overdose. But the point is, you would go, well, that wouldn't be appropriate. And I'm not certain that Elvis was more or less promiscuous than Martin Luther King Jr. Now, this needs to be said from John Piper. I don't know if he came home. Many believe he did. A speaker in the earlier panel documented to the point at which he thought he came home and met God in a profound way. I hope so. Well, I do too. Of course I do. I mean, seriously. Because don't worry, Martin Luther King Jr. and his sins of philandering, the orgies that he participated in, all can be forgiven. That's how great Jesus is when it comes to saving. But if at best his theology is questionable, and it doesn't appear that there's any clear recantation, which you would expect from somebody who wrote doctoral theses that involved heresy, some sort of public denunciation. Without that, we'd like to, hopefully he did, but we don't know. At best, why would we do a conference celebrating a legacy, and you can call it a good legacy, of social advances, but not when the individual's so stained and at best so controversial? This could have been a helpful conference, but I think that the premise was flawed from the get-go, and sadly, best I can tell, the execution of it was equally flawed. And the outcome of it has not been a happy result of more unity and love in the body. That is a mark worth noting. This is Wretched Radio.
Of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. be revealed and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that,